Welcome to The Whole View. I'm Stacy Toth of Real Everything, and I'm here each week to dive deeper into how we can find happiness and health inside and out through self love, body positivity, and discovering new ways to be our best selves. Before we get started, a reminder that this podcast is for general educational purposes and is not intended to diagnose, advise, or treat any physical or mental illness. And while Dr. Sonia is an endodontist, she's not yours. We always recommend you see a licensed health professional accordingly. With that said, I do want to welcome you, Dr. Sonia Chopra, a board certified practicing endodontist and thought leader. Born without 8 teeth, she has been the ultimate dental patient and experienced every dental procedure you can imagine. But when persistent pain and infection led to a root canal, it shaped the trajectory of her life. And today she is an educator for dentists and patients, a TEDx speaker, Forbes contributor, author, and today's guest on The Whole View. Welcome so much. Welcome. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure.
I'd love if you could share a little bit more about what brought you to this work. I don't think most people are born without 8 teeth. Well, most of us are born without all of our teeth, but eventually they come in. So
Right.
maybe you can share a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So I always say I was born to be a dentist because I had 8 of my adult teeth that didn't come in. Luckily, 4 of them were my wisdom teeth. So that made some of my life easier, but 4 of them were in really important places. And missing those had a lot of repercussions for me from an oral health perspective. And my mom was really adamant on making sure that I had a full complement of teeth when I was going to college. So this all really hit me the summer that I graduated high school. Okay. So it didn't really, I knew I had a problem growing up through those years where I was exfoliating my teeth, that growing into my adult dentition. I didn't really understand the impact until much later. So as I'm finally, through my growth and development, I'm finally stabilized. It was time to now look at my mouth and see what I could do to fill in some of the gaps that were there. Because to be honest, my confidence was really wrecked by having these congenitally missing teeth. So I had braces, now it was an opportunity to get in there and restore things so that I looked normal. And so the summer after I graduated high school, I was at the dentist every single week trying to fix this problem. And soon after I did all the work, I started to develop a toothache, which is crazy. It was a little coincidental because everyone thought that the dental work had actually caused the toothache. So all their eyes were going to those teeth. And actually, the tooth that was causing me trouble was not one of those teeth, but nobody could figure it out. So I was a diagnostic dilemma to my dentist, and he really could not localize my pain. I couldn't localize my pain. I was having referred pain. And all I knew is that there was something going on the lower left side of my face. I couldn't pinpoint anything. And one thing that people need to understand is that referred pain in the mouth is a very common thing. And it's really important to get a proper diagnosis before you embark on any sort of treatment. And I think that's the lesson that I was brought to this earth to teach, because I really learned the hard way. I ended up going on a wild goose chase of appointment after appointment with different providers. Even outside of dentistry, I saw a neurologist because people thought I had trigeminal neuralgia, but it was all coming from a cracked tooth. I was actually referred to an oral surgeon at one point because everyone was giving up on my diagnosis. They're like, just take this tooth out and then she'll be fine. And so I went, I got numbed up, and I got my tooth out and I felt fine. And then once the anesthesia wore off, I still had my toothache because they took the wrong tooth out. So now I'm missing 9 teeth. It was actually the tooth behind the tooth that they thought it was that was actually the culprit of the pain. And then and only then was I referred to an endodontist. I don't know why I wasn't referred to an endodontist from the beginning. I didn't know what an endodontist was. And I think that's a big problem in the world, that people don't even know that an endodontist is a whole subspecialty in dentistry. that can actually help heal you. And that part of awareness is a part of my platform. That's why I'm talking about it so that people do understand that there's a whole specialty of dentistry that supports people with toothaches, with this kind of referred pain. And it's important to know that we exist. This endodontist changed my life. He made me trust my body again because for the 9 months that I was going through this saga of not knowing why I was feeling bad. I was feeling really bad. I was starting to not trust my body. I didn't feel good because of the pain. I was losing sleep, and that can really do a lot to one's mental health. And he took his time with me. And the way he made that diagnosis, the way he explained everything, the way he made me trust my body again, it changed my life. And that is why I myself became an endodontist. Well, first I knew I had to go in either medicine or dentistry because I'm Indian and that's what my parents chose for me. But when it came down to it, I felt like I really resonated with dentistry the most because I was always the dental patient and that I had a different perspective. And so I went with dentistry. And while I was in dental school, I was very intrigued by the field of endodontics. I graduated dental school. I worked as a general dentist for a few years, but then I really decided that endo, AKA root canals, AKA saving teeth, being a tooth saver is really my one true love. So that's how I came to be.
I think it's a fascinating journey and story that you can take a trauma that you've had and turn it into a passion of compassionate care for others. And I think that is a journey we all want in our lives, right? To turn the lived experiences that we've had into something helpful for others. I would love if you could just maybe start for the people that don't know, what is endodontics?
Endodontics is the field of dentistry that saves teeth. We do root canals for a living, and that's probably a really horrible word to a lot of people, but I'm here to tell people that the game has changed. It is such a different procedure nowadays. It's the level of technology that's available to us now is remarkable, and it's really gotten even better probably in the last 6 years. So a lot of the stuff that you find online is probably not true. There's just been so many advancements that have allowed the root canal procedure that takes a diseased tooth and brings it back to health. It's so regenerative. We can not just save your tooth, but regenerate the bone around the tooth. Now, the tooth itself, we can't rebuild the tooth, right? But we have crowns and bridges and stuff like that to help restore the tooth back into its shape function. But when a tooth gets infected, the bone around it gets resorbed. Essentially, the bone pulls away because it doesn't like to sit next to the infection. So it pulls away and it creates these cavitations or crypts in the bone. But when you do the root canal in a right way, because there's a difference between a good and a bad root canal, when you do a well executed root canal, you actually can regenerate the bone around the tooth. And that, for me, is the wild part that we have these superpowers. It's really magical. We have this ability to recreate our own body through cool ways. And that's what root canals do. And we save your teeth, and teeth are important because we need them to nourish our bodies. We need them to breathe. We need them for so many things. And there's no need to be afraid anymore because it's a quick procedure, it's an efficient procedure. It is so much more disinfected, like than ever before, which I think is people's fear that they fear the root canals are toxic. But again, the technology has changed the game and more people need to be aware about it so that they don't have this fear.
I am really curious about the toxic part of it, the myth, so to speak, of all the things that could go wrong. I'm wondering if maybe you could just bust those and then
Mhm.
also talk about why it would be so important to move past some of those fears with the risk that you might feel like you're taking because of how important teeth are for, as you mentioned, airways and breathing, but also digestion and general health. And they're all tied in together if you could, talk about that, because I know that's one of your big kind of education platforms.
Yes. So we were given teeth for a reason. And that reason is not to pull them out. And I want people to value teeth just as much as you do your fingers and your thumbs because you have multiple of them, right? People are like, oh, that tooth is in the back. I don't need it. They just take it out. Oh, I have 32 of them. Not me, but most people. I have 32 of them. I can afford to lose one. But if your finger got infected, you wouldn't just chop it off. So how do I create the value for people to equate the value of their teeth to the value of their finger? That's really what I want people to see because it's easy to take our teeth for granted. It's easy to just remove one instead of save one, but it's doing a lot for us. Number one, it's the first part of our digestion. And these teeth are what allow us to nourish and hydrate our bodies. And that is so important. And we need teeth to chew, and chewing hard things as industrialization has really taken our food and softened it up into smoothies, into all these things, yogurts and stuff like this, where people think they're eating healthy. The act of chewing actually maintains our airway. Our airways are narrowing because of our diet. We still need to crunch. And when we crunch and we chew and we utilize those teeth, we maintain patent airways, and breath is the secret to longevity. We help our bodies break down our food and start the digestion process. There's just so much that goes into it. Not to mention, your teeth also help you attract people into your life. When you smile, when you have a nice smile, it allows connection, it allows confidence. So there's a mental health component to our teeth as well. So physical and mental. So teeth are really important to save. But unfortunately, there's a lot of bad press about saving teeth. And I think the bad press needs to be shifted. The focus of the toxicity, yes, there are root canals that are bad for you, for sure, but they're not very well executed root canals. And there is a clear difference between a bad root canal and a good root canal. And I'm not trying to say dentists are bad. What I'm trying to say is the problem is the education around endodontics and dental school. It's not enough. And if people looked at dentistry as specialized as medicine, they would understand that they would want to see a specialist for this procedure. Now, there are many general dentists who can do a great job because they've taken the initiative to learn beyond dental school. But there's a hard truth. You only have to do 4 root canals on the high end in some schools, and maybe a range between 2 and 4 root canals to graduate. Now, that's like saying you're going to let somebody deliver your baby who's delivered 2 babies. You wouldn't do that. You would actually go see an OBGYN because there's a specialty for that. That person has delivered hundreds of babies before they came to deliver your baby. So an endodontist goes to an extra 2 years of school and do at least 250 root canals before they go out into the real world to really do that. And then every day, I do 8 to 10 root canals every time I work a day, whereas a general dentist may do a few a month. So keeping their hands wet with the procedure is not as much as a specialist. So I think people need to understand that they have a choice of staying with their general dentist to do the root canal or seeking care from a specialist. There are some people who don't want to leave their dentist. They want their dentist to be a one-stop for everything kind of shop. And that's really, I don't think that's very smart because there's so much to learn in dentistry, just like medicine. And you wouldn't go to a dermatologist for your brain surgery. It's the same thing. Your dentist is going to have boundaries. Your may not like to do every procedure or feel good about doing it. So when they do refer you, and there's a reason, but do your research because even not every endodontist is created equal. And you want to make sure that they're utilizing the most up to date technology that has allowed us to become better clinicians. And a lot of what's out there, a lot of the beliefs of toxicity of root canals is out there because of antiquated data, of old studies that came up in the 1880s. And people are still revisiting that. And that's just not right. So much more that has come to be. But when we allow the belief that these root canals are toxic to live on, that's a problem because people are going to continue to take their teeth out when so much has changed. And understanding that there is a difference between a good root canal and a bad root canal is the essence of what we need to talk about because there's a lot of root canals where the tooth was treated, but the whole tooth wasn't actually treated. There's a lot of teeny tiny canals in there. And that's why we use microscopes during treatment because the number one reason a root canal is failing or not doing its job, or we see that bone loss around the tooth, is because a canal was never treated. And that means there's original bacteria in there. So I've gone in and I've treated like a 7-year-old root canal that a canal was never treated. And once I treat everything 100%, then the body can heal and regenerate. But there's a lot of things. 50% of my practice, unfortunately, is fixing root canals that were not done to the standard of care. And it's not like the dentist meant to do bad. They were just doing what they were taught with using the resources that they know. And unfortunately, sometimes that's not good enough. And then people have to go and spend the money again on a specialist. And I think that's where the negativity comes from. Like, oh, already had this done. Why do I have to have it redone? Why do I have to pay for it twice? That's not fair.
I am very fortunate that I have only had one adult cavity and no root canals. And so my personal experience is, first of all, I don't like dentists. And you're the
Nobody
second
does.
dentist. I know you're the second dentist that I've had on the show. And I'm just going to be forthright in saying, I really don't like the dentist.
Okay, but
Um,
why? But why?
because I'm a redhead. And
Mhm.
do you want to explain to our listeners what that means?
Well, it means that you may have a difficult time getting numb.
Yes. And my dentist, when I had my very first adult tooth cavity and was getting it filled, was in a hurry. And despite the fact that I kept saying, I can still feel, he would tap and he would, can you feel? Yes, I can. He was like, you've had 3 doses. There's no way you can actually feel. Where you just know that my hand is there. We're gonna proceed. And I had an incredibly painful experience. And ever since then, I have just avoided want to avoid going to the dentist. But the good news is that I take good care of my teeth because I don't want to have to go to the dentist and experience that. But I
Now,
know
do you go for your checkups to like for prevention?
yeah, but not as often as I should. Yeah.
Okay. Because let's unpack that because I tell people like my practice should not be as busy as it is. Okay. People can prevent seeing me for sure. And I'm so happy. It sounds like you have great like home care, that your oral hygiene at home is great. That prevents you, right? So if you just brush twice a day and if you religiously floss once a day before bed, and if you go to get your cleanings which don't require anesthesia for the most part, you can probably have the most economical dental bill ever, plus the least amount of pain. So and it's just such an easy solution. So that's what I recommend for everyone. So I'm going to encourage you to go religiously twice a year to catch things when they're small, because you will save money in the long run and you will learn to trust things a little bit more. And but you nailed a really important conversation because there are a lot of people who don't understand anesthesia. And if you get good anesthesia, any dental procedure is easy. So, like, there's people who come to me and then on the referral slip, it says, couldn't get the patient numb, do a root canal. I'm like, okay, first of all, the root canal needs the most profound anesthesia of all of the procedures. So if you can't get the patient numb and you have the expectation that I'm going to get the patient numb, and guess what? I have the expectation that I'm going to get the patient numb because I do know how to get the patient numb. My assistant calls me Dr. Get People Numb Chopra because there is a way. And so maybe your dentist, and I'm not calling him or her out. I'm just saying there's a different method of anesthesia that maybe you could have been given. I like the Ligajet. I actually call her my best friend. She has a name in my operatory. My best friend, she gets people numb every single time. It's not that I'm using a different type of anesthetic, it's a different method of getting people numb. And so these are the strategies that your dentist needs to be confident that they can deliver to give patients a better experience. Right?
I appreciate that, and it was a long time ago. I hope that there's better education now, and certainly I've learned and I can advocate and educate someone else. I would not be in the same situation that I was at that time that it happened, but I bring that up because, well, first of all, I think a lot of people probably have an experience or an aversion, and maybe they don't even relate it back to, like, it took me a while to be like, admittedly, I didn't go to the dentist for almost a decade, and I was trying to unpack why that is because I was sending my husband and my kids, but then I wasn't going, and I, like, then realized I unpacked, like, this traumatic experience that I had, and I think that there's probably a lot of people who avoid the dentist because of some sort of fear or trauma or something around it, the tools, the sounds, the vulnerability, like, all of it is a lot for people. And while we're talking about trying to avoid teeth being pulled and trying to keep your teeth and take good care of them, there's also, I try to encourage listeners to not have shame around what might have happened in the past. And so you can't change the past by stressing out about it or worrying about it or anything like that. All we can do is control what we have now that's in front of us and to learn. And I think for me, I'm really curious about the modernization of things that have changed that maybe people could benefit from understanding and learning when you talk about things like different kinds of methods or things that have changed and regrowing of teeth. These are of the bones, right? Because teeth. I love this song
Nice.
from Kimmy Schmidt. The teeth are our outside bones. Like, sorry, go ahead.
No, they're working on growing teeth, actual teeth, but they're not 100% there yet, but they're working on it.
Yeah. Anyway, if you have you heard the Kimmy Schmidt song?
I haven't.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna look it up.
Immediately after this, and honestly, Matt's probably gonna put my, husband who produces the podcast, I encourage him to put in the song right now, but there's a character on the show who is very flamboyant and funny, and he's wonderful, and he is auditioning for a commercial, I think for, like, I don't know if it's a toothpaste or gum or something like that, and he starts singing this song about teeth being our outside bones. That's both really creepy and hysterical. So, we know that we can repair our bones when it comes to something like a broken leg and wearing a cast and doing that sort of thing. And so it's fascinating to me to think about how there are some people that have remineralized their teeth and no longer need a cavity, or there's all these kinds of like modern advancements that can help people. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, both from like the holistic side of what some of that looks like once you get the bacteria and the infection and your body can trust or heal itself, but also some of the more modern advancements that you're talking about? Like, what are they specifically?
So I'm going to give you from the root canal perspective, the modern advancements, okay? Because I'm a specialist. There's a full, vast industry of dentistry that is growing rapidly. And there's a lot of new fun stuff. So I'm going to talk to you about when you've gotten to the point of no return. Now, you can remineralize areas of teeth that have small incipient like cavities. You can. You've always been able to do that with proper oral hygiene. And that's why I think keeping your dental appointments is the most important thing because you can develop that relationship with your hygienist and work on reversing small areas and preventing things from going too deep. But once you get too deep and you're in my world, we want to make sure we not only save your tooth, but also regenerate bone. I will say, like when I was an endodontic resident and I graduated from my residency in 2008, I was trained on using a dental operating microscope. So basically, like most dentists with those funny goggles, that's not what I use. I use this thing that literally comes out of the wall. It's a giant microscope, and I'm looking through it through the entire procedure. Okay. And I can find the teeny tiny canals and I can really keep my opening into the tooth really small so I can conserve tooth structure and really work delicately through the tooth. That is what I grew up on. Most people, most endodontists will use a microscope because that's how we were trained as residents. Fast forward to 2012, I think in 2009, cone beam computed tomography, CBCT, our 3D scanners started to come onto the scene. Now, I was brand new in my practice, so I wasn't financially prepared to make that investment within a year of graduation, but I knew the value of this technology. Basically, instead of using a two-dimensional X-ray, which can be very limiting from a diagnostic standpoint, it allows you to take an image of a tooth and like spin it around, look at it in cross section. Now, all of a sudden, we can make diagnoses faster. So when somebody is having referred pain, we can find the culprit tooth a lot faster. We can see hidden infections that you may not even realize that you have. We can see them and then be able to treat them faster. We can appreciate your tooth's anatomy a lot better. So I can actually see how many canals your tooth has prior to even getting into the tooth. So I'll know if your tooth has one canal, two canals, three canals, four canals, five canals, sometimes six. And that's important because root canals only work when you find every canal and get to the end of every canal. So that changed the game for me and that changed the game for me in 2012. And I've grown to really understand the complexity of tooth anatomy, which is one of the reasons why after root canals you could still have some bacteria. And I think as an industry, we understand that and appreciate it. So fast forward to 2018, we start using things like the gentle wave. The gentle wave is a new technology that it uses sound waves to move the disinfection solution through the tooth in those hard to reach places that we couldn't before, where bacteria would linger after the root canal. And so now we have this technology that allows us for a more thorough disinfection. And then once you remove all that bacteria, that's what allows the bone to regenerate. And the problem of the disease process reverses back to normal and back into health. And then we also now use endodontic lasers too. So those are the four pieces of tech that have come into my life and my ecosystem since I even graduated from my residency that I was never taught on. But as the clinician, as the growing clinician, as the world changes, you have to keep up with this technology to make sure you're providing the greatest care possible for the best possible outcomes to your patients.
And I know that there are not just dentists, but doctors and a lot of people who feel most comfortable in what they were trained on in residency. And so it makes a lot of sense to also ask questions, right? As a patient, I think it's very important to understand the limitations of the person that you're working with. They might be the most experienced in a certain thing, but if that certain thing isn't what's going to benefit you the most, then it doesn't make sense for you to work with them. I think that's a really great example of changing technology and why it's important. I'm going to admit that I learned something new, which is great. Help me understand about the canals in the teeth. How are those different from the nerves, right? Because what I understand with a root canal is that you're going in and you're either killing or removing or doing whatever you need to with that nerve ending, and then scooping out the like infection in the tooth. That's my very limited layman's understanding of what it is you do. And so it sounds like you could share with us a much more helpful explanation of what it actually
Yeah.
is.
So let me take you back to the actual purpose of the nerve. Okay. So the nerve inside a tooth is actually what is responsible for growing the tooth from the tooth bud. So when you're born, you have the tooth bud that is not shaped like a tooth. And as you grow, that tooth forms. And that formation happens from the tooth pulp, which is the nerve. Without that nerve, your tooth cannot form. That's why when we have children who have deep cavities and their teeth are still developing, we actually don't want to do a full root canal on that tooth because we want to keep the nerve alive. And the coolest part is that children have really resilient nerves. You can actually just do like a partial like removal of the nerve and keep the rest of the nerve alive so that the full formation of the tooth can. So another cool aspect of what we do. But once the tooth is fully formed, the only thing that nerve brings you really, yes, it gives you a little blood supply, but the only sensation, the only thing you have is the ability to feel hot and cold on your tooth. There's only pain receptors in the nerve of a tooth. That's it. Nociceptors. That's it. And so if you put cold on it, hot on it, it hurts, right? So when a nerve dies, it dies from bacteria because bacteria got in from a cavity, or it could have gotten in from a crack. People who grind their teeth, clench their teeth, they'll induce cracks in their teeth. And then that crack becomes a doorway for bacteria to get in. So everything in my world is always bacterial. I'm always trying to get rid of bacteria. Each tooth has a different set of canal spaces where the nerve lives. So imagine you have a tooth with a root. Each root is like a Twinkie, and the nerve is like the cream inside. And essentially, the nerve, the cream gets dirty from bacteria. My job to go in there, take out all the cream, disinfect it, and then I put a new filling material in there. I basically give you fresh cream. Make sense?
And
That,
so the canals are the Twinkies.
right. The root wall is the cake.
Okay.
The nerve itself is the cream. Okay. So you leave the cake intact and you basically just pull out that cream.
And what you're calling a canal is the combination of the two, the cake and the cream.
The canal is the cream. So
Okay.
so you have the crown of a tooth.
Mhm.
Okay. That's what you see here. The pearly whites. And then you have the roots that are in the gum. We don't really pay attention to them because we don't see them, right? But those roots are the Twinkies itself. Okay. And then inside you have literally, it's almost like they're tubes, right? And in the tube is where the pulp runs. Okay. And that's the part that we clean out. You're just cleaning out that tube. And then you're going to put in a filling once everything is disinfected and you're going to seal it up. So a root canal essentially disinfects your tooth and then seals it. You're just cleaning out those tubes. And then you typically put a crown on top of it because you want to seal it. You want to, number one, you want to protect the tooth from breaking because if you've had a big cavity, you don't have as much tooth structure there anymore. You have to cap it to protect it. Otherwise, you'll crack it. And then the tooth will need to be extracted because it's not savable anymore. But also, that crown also provides a bacterial seal. Like you're keeping the bacteria out from that crown. So that crown is such an important piece of the process to make sure that you maintain your tooth after you've invested so much time and energy into it from the root canal.
I am not intentionally being dense. When you say the cream, so is the nerve and the canal the same thing?
The nerve is a synonym for the pulp, which is the cream.
Okay, so there could be I think of most teeth as having like four roots, right? Like what you see when the tooth comes out, what's in the gum, right? Like four of those. But you're saying some people could have six, and in each one of those is a nerve. So
Right.
there's not just one nerve, there's
Right.
actually like multiple nerves in each of our teeth.
Correct. And that's the hard part because that's where Mother Nature creates this variety. You never know what you're going to get. And that's why this 3D technology is so valuable because of the variety Mother Nature gives us. It's never like the teeth are never straight. The roots are never straight. They have curves, they have connections. And when you see it, I wish I could actually show you because it's actually really cool. When you see what the cone beam imaging can show you, all of a sudden you have this extra layer of predictability for the clinician, be like, okay, this is what I need to treat instead of guessing. Because from a two-dimensional image, you can't appreciate how many roots are in there because they'll surprise you every time. You think there's two and there's four. It's wild.
It does fascinate me how very different everybody's teeth are. Like, my
Yeah.
husband and I's teeth are shaped so differently. Not just like, I don't know, when I was younger, I used to think that if people had different smiles or needed braces or whatever, it was just because the positioning of the teeth, but it's actually the teeth themselves are so differently shaped. Some people can have small teeth, some people can have large teeth. My husband's brother actually had 2 baby teeth that stayed forever, like you, his adult teeth never grew in, right? Like his family we always joke, his family's got some weird teeth. But, yeah, it's super fascinating how bio-individual something like that could be, that as a dentist, you're going in, you're like, "Oh, I could be expecting 2 roots on this tooth," and then you're surprised to find that someone has a completely different structure, because it wouldn't be like that in the bones of our body, right? Like, you wouldn't go in to operate on an arm and you're like, "Oh, there's 2 forearm bones." Right? Like, it's
Right.
not the way it works. Yeah.
And I think that's why that's important to understand. Like each tooth is different. Like teeth are like snowflakes. They're all different. And even in the same individual, they're so different. And the experience from one tooth to the next can be so different. And I have a lot of patients who get upset. They're like, well, I don't want to pay for another consultation. I'm like, "Well, I've never met you before. I've never seen your tooth before. Your dentist has, but I haven't, and I need to understand your tooth on a different level. I get it. Your dentist told you you need a root canal. You don't need me to tell you you need a root canal. You've been told that, even though sometimes they don't. But like, I want to A, confirm the diagnosis, but B, I need to understand that tooth because that tooth is so special and it's going to require something very unique that the tooth next door would be also unique. And I think that level of appreciation is missing from the lay person. And that's another piece of the level of awareness that I'm trying to share is that we need to really understand the whole person, but also the whole tooth story, as I call it.
Do you think that part of that snowflake teeth that we all have has something to do with how the teeth are grown? Like, I immediately go to things like understanding ACE traumas, understanding the immune system, understanding those sort of things and how that could impact. We know that it impacts so many things about health, and I can see that it could impact something like how your body is supplying nutrients to grow teeth at that time. I'm wondering if you've seen people in like the same families that have very well, that's not necessarily like that's an n equals one more sort of thing, but I think just more about how individually, as we are growing and working on our overall health and wellness, that as parents, supporting our children as they grow and learning hygiene and trying to teach them that their body is not this infinite being that we all think when we're children, right? How we could be affected as our teeth are maturing without necessarily like that layperson's understanding of the impact to the teeth at that time.
Okay, so there's a huge genetic component for sure. Okay. And I'm going to just use my own family as this. My mom is missing the same teeth. My daughter is missing the same teeth. So there is 100% a genetic component. You also, each individual also has their own oral microbiome. Okay. And you typically get it from your mother. Your bacteria is given to you by your mother after birth. But let's look at my husband and I. If I don't floss, my gums will bleed like crazy. So I know I have to floss. My husband, who's also a dentist, admits he's not a great flosser. Okay. And he's not. But he doesn't need to. Okay. So every person is going to have a different need. And my husband doesn't get cavities. I get 8 cavities every time I go to the dentist as a child. That was me. That was not him. He has a different flora in his mouth. I have a karyogenic flora. I also have a periodontal flora if I let it get out of control. My husband has neither. I have, and I can see the difference in my kids. I have a kid who can get away with not being as hygienic as some of my other kids. My one daughter is like me. She has the same teeth. She has the missing teeth, and got 8 cavities the first time because I tried to not use fluoride in her because I was anti-fluoride. But then I realized this child actually needs fluoride until she gains the manual dexterity to clean her teeth properly. So as soon as I switched to fluoride, she no longer got cavities. So for that child, I needed fluoride. For my other child, I didn't. So everybody is different. And that is why going to the dentist is so important because your dentist helps you understand your mouth. So some people have bacteria in the mouth that causes cavities. Some people have bacteria in the mouth that causes periodontal disease. Some people have both. Some people have none. And just be careful, like when you're listening to like dental influencers out there, like who say, oh, don't floss, flossing is bad. They may not have to floss, but you may. And so understanding your mouth is such an important piece of taking care of yourself. And every single person is going to be different, even in the same family. So important.
And fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about how, and I'm wondering if it's related to the microbiome in our mouth, how root canals are related to our immune system in terms of the infection and all of that? How does that come into play in an overall system within our body?
So when you need a root canal, it tells me that there's some sort of dysbiosis, that there was some part of your flora that got out of whack that needs to be recontrolled. And the root canal is what gets your flora back into that homeostasis that you need. And then you have to understand, okay, how did it get to that point? For the most part, what I see is it is a, a lack of oral hygiene. Okay, so if we start working on a proper oral hygiene, we are going to be able to prevent these things. Okay. Now, some people have things like amelogenesis imperfecta, which is actually a deficiency in the enamel. And so those are people who are going to have added fluoride or things like that. Like I'm not a fluoride proponent at all, but there are individuals who need it. Like think about a geriatric population who has arthritis and can no longer take care of their mouth. They probably need that. But there's a whole population of people who don't. And so really understanding each individual. But when we have this toothache, this infection, your immune system is hard at work. It's interesting because the moment a nerve dies, you'll lose your ability your body to signal that there's a problem. So the first signal is that when there's a problem that, oh, my tooth is sensitive to cold. It wasn't like that. That's your body saying, oh, something's up. Go to the dentist and see if it's a cavity that can be treated and prevent the root canal. But then all of a sudden you have heat sensitivity. That's not a great sign. That is a sign that your body is saying, okay, now there's pulpal involvement. That nerve is involved. Your nerve is about to die. Then it transitions into biting pain. And sometimes you even get swelling. And that's your immune system trying to encapsulate that infection. Swelling is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing because all your white blood cells just collected and is fighting for you. And then sometimes the swelling goes away and they're like, patient's like, oh, problem's gone. No, it's just your body mounted an immune response. It won for the moment. It suppressed all the bacteria. And then it said, okay, war's over. And it pulls back. And then you're still fine for a little bit. But then all of a sudden, these guys that survived that immune attack, they start to have a party again. They go, all of a sudden, you're like, I have pain again. And then all of a sudden, the immune system's back and they're like, hey, I thought I killed you guys. And then it mounts an immune attack and it pushes it down. So you'll have this intermittent pain, right? Because the immune system's going in and out and you don't have a constant pain. But to some people, they think, oh, well, it didn't hurt me all the time. I don't need treatment. No, it's your body is fighting for you. And your body's smart. Your body won't allow that infection to go from one tooth to the next. Your body is so smart. We're built so beautifully. It's so freakishly beautiful. That's when people feel like, oh, I had a bump and then it went away. No, that bump was your first sign that you need to go to the dentist. It went away temporarily because your immune system mounted the attack. It won in the moment and then it'll let go and then it'll come back and it'll keep coming and going. So our bodies are smart.
I am fascinated by the idea that there could be someone out there who's experiencing tooth pain that doesn't go seek help, because as fearful as I am and the PTSD that I had, I also have this paranoia of an infection shooting up from your tooth to your brain. And that is like a real thing. And I don't know if you know the statistics of how often that can actually happen. But I remember reading an article once about someone who actually died of a brain infection from a tooth infection. And I immediately was like, okay, I need to go to the dentist. Like,
It can happen. It is very rare, but I will say that was probably pure neglect because it was probably sitting there for a very long time. And when I say that there are infections that can be silent, you do not always have to have pain to have a problem, which is another great reason to go to your dentist. And so we can check things out. Like people are like, oh, I don't want to pay for x-rays. Sometimes that's the only way we can see. So don't deny the imaging. Understand that we have digital radiography, that we have things that keep the radiation super low. You actually get more radiation flying from New York to LA. You get more radiation gardening in your garden than what you get at the dentist's office. But we had developed all of these fears, and these fears are what preventing us from taking care of our body. And we just need to kibosh those things. And if you really have a concern, voice it. I love patient advocacy. I really do. And I think that it's important to find a provider that allows you a safe space to bring up your concerns, to say, hey, doc, I don't get numb very well. Can you walk me through how you're going to do this differently? And you have the right to say, I like this provider and I don't. Another reason why I love consults is because I'm not just interviewing a patient if they're a good fit for me, but I want my patient to make sure I'm a good fit for them. Tell me your issues. Tell me previous bad experiences. I don't want to repeat history. I want to see how I can help you. How can I make you have a great experience? I have a television. I'm going to give you a TV. As you recline, that TV comes over your head. I'm going to give you headphones. Or if you prefer your own music, blast it. If I need you, I'll tap you on the shoulder. If you need me, you raise that hand. If I see that left hand go up, I'm going to stop. Maybe you just have to use the restroom. That left hand tells me you're uncomfortable in some way and I need to fix it. And so you need to find somebody with this type of attitude that wants to make you comfortable, that there's open lines of communication. You work together on the thing and you have a stopping point. If something needs to stop, you stop. And that left hand for me is my signal for everybody. And so we don't know if we didn't do something right, if our patients don't tell us. So I encourage my patients to speak up. I encourage the communication. And I think that's an important piece of the doctor patient relationship.
I agree and love all of that. I'm wondering how you would recommend someone go about finding a dental health professional, whether it's a dentist or an endodontist or whatever service they might be looking for, with someone willing to have this kind of compassionate care.
I think your friend circle is a great thing. If you see a certain name come up over and over, I think doing your research is really important. Finding out what technology is important to you, figuring out what your own values are, and finding a provider that has the same values as you do. You can look at Google reviews. I will say, in my own experience, my negative reviews that are out there, because I don't have a 5.0, I might have a 4.8. But the people who give me a negative review, it's always about money because they didn't value what I do. They don't like the price tag of a root canal. It's not cheap, right? That's why I say prevent me, because that's the cheapest. But when you're in that moment, I'm going to utilize all this amazing technology. It's not going to be the cheapest thing on the block, but if that's what your value is, don't choose me, right? But don't choose me and then not enjoy that your insurance didn't cover it and then leave me a negative review. So I say look at reviews and see what the reviews are about. Because if it's just money, then they really do have a 5.0, probably. And so find somebody who has the same values as you. And it's okay to interview a few. Go and experience their practice and then find a home and stay in that home. And understand this is a big thing that I think people don't really understand. Dental insurance, for the most part, if you have a PPO plan, you can actually pick your own provider. And just because they may not accept your plan or they're considered out of network doesn't mean you're out of coverage. So if your dentist changes their insurance, like who they're contracted with, it doesn't mean you have to change your dentist. You will still have coverage. It's just the flow of the money changes. You pay your dentist and your insurance pays you, as opposed to you pay your dentist half and then the insurance pays the dentist. Does that make sense? You can still go to the same provider. And I see people switching all the time. And that's where they get into trouble because they found somebody who isn't as good as the one they grew up with. And just because there's been an insurance shift doesn't mean you have to lose that provider that you love and trust and build a relationship over time.
It's funny that you're talking about Google reviews because I have a 16-year-old who has his first job at a bagel shop, which bear with me here for a minute. I'm going to get there. And he is the front face of the bagel shop. And he checks the Google reviews pretty regularly to make sure that no one is saying anything negative about him, which I think is so cute. And he's such my child. That would be a thing that he would worry about. And he came in to my office just yesterday to show me a Google review that someone was mad that they were out of bagels. And he was like, "Why would you leave a bad review about bagel place? Because the bagels were so good that we sold out." He's like, "Why would you leave a bad review?" And I'm like, that's the thing about reviews is it's just people expressing their emotions. And it's important that when you're looking at the reviews of something, you don't just look at what the number is. You actually read what someone is saying. And
Right.
if I were looking at the reviews at the bagel shop and I saw that someone gave it 1 star because they were out of bagels, I would say, "Oh, this sounds like a bagel shop I should check out because they sold out of bagels. They must be good."
Right. And
And
the guy probably went at 4:30 PM.
exactly.
Like, come on. Like, if you want a fresh bagel, you go at 8 AM. But we don't have control over what these people say. And here's another thing. When you are looking at negative reviews, you can see the review history of these people. And so I actually went down the rabbit hole with my daughter. We were, because I showed her, like, I was trying to teach her the lesson, like, hey, not everyone is nice to me. I have bad reviews, and I'm going to show you this one. We actually made a verb. This is horrible to say, but we made a verb out of this patient's name because he was so mean to us. That we're like, okay, but he left us a really mean review. It was basically like saying we were a bunch of high schoolers, but we're just a team that loves each other. And we want a team that loves each other to care for our patients and bring love to the operatory. So we were actually proud of it. But then we decided to look at what other reviews of other businesses that he's had. And so I was sharing this with my daughter because I'm like, you're not going to get 100% glowing reviews for the rest of your life in any domain of your life. So here, listen. And then so she went down the rabbit hole. She's like, he gave Starbucks a 1 star because there was no toilet paper. Like, maybe they had a busy day. Maybe they couldn't get to the bathroom because they were too busy serving their customers. There's just so many reasons. So really, if you want to find somebody good, do your research, but do smart research too. Maybe somebody is just an upset person because there was either 1 star or 5 star. There was nothing in between. And when you really read the 1 stars, you realize that I don't know if I could have done anything to make this person.
Yeah, I'm
And
as an author, I've had some wild reviews on the podcast. I've had some wild reviews, and you you can't change what someone is going to publicly put somewhere, and it doesn't matter who you are or any of those things. And I think that's where we need to be educated and learn and listen from you and shows like this or other educational platforms where people can learn things so that they can be an informed consumer. And when they see
right,
something, it's like, oh, that person probably is experiencing some sort of negative thing in their life, and it's coming across in other ways towards other people because of the negativity they're experiencing in their own life. It's not really applicable to the thing that they're talking about. So I fully get
right.
that. I do
And
want to end.
oh, I
Yeah,
just want to say one more thing. I will say sometimes there is beauty in the negative review because I have been able to grow from a lot of them. I just wish that this is where the patient advocacy comes in. If there is something that really troubles a patient, you don't have to do it publicly. Like we're open to feedback. If you want us to learn from something, like tell us. And I think that's a beautiful way to go. We're not perfect and we learn from practice. That's why they call it practice, right? But if you really want your provider to learn, whether it's a dentist, whether it's a medical provider, like give us direct feedback because that's how we can grow and make it better for you next time and the next person. So I just wanted to end there because I do think that there is some beauty in feedback as well.
absolutely. And I think if you've had a conversation with a medical professional and they either have or have not tried to make it right, sharing that experience with others so that if they're thinking about doing something like that, I know for me, I have left reviews for medical professionals around whether or not they have weight bias and whether or not they've actually treated me in a way that is not approaching a stigma perspective, but in actual looking at my health. And I have conversations with doctors. They have an opportunity to treat the actual health issue versus, oh, you know what? You have bad eyesight, lose weight, right? Like there's so many jokes in the community like that. And I think sharing information like that so that if someone else is in a position where they're feeling vulnerable or they have a fear of a dentist and the dentist wasn't compassionate, what didn't take their time, didn't do whatever, it is helpful to share that information, but doing it in a respectful way and also letting the provider know and giving them an opportunity to make it right or do what's right. And the same with businesses, right? Like I don't have a terrible restaurant experience, not talk to the manager and then go anonymously online and talk negatively about it. Like, cause you don't know, maybe the waiter's grandmother died that day and he had to come into his shift anyways. Anyway, we could go on and on
Yeah.
about this. That's not the point of the show. I do want to end on a positive note where I try to help listeners take something away. Like they've listened to the show today and they're like, oh gosh, I need to find a new endodontist. I need to get a different dentist. I need to brush and floss every day. I need to do all these things. And then they feel overwhelmed and they do nothing. So I always like to end with just like, what is one thing that you would like listeners to walk away from the show and take action on to help improve themselves?
I really do feel like flossing is life. It can save you so much money. This little piece of string, it can save you so much money. And that new habit, whether you keep it near where you watch TV or on your bedside, even if it's not right at the bathroom sink, it's okay. You can floss anywhere. But really doing that and making that 2 minute habit stick every single day will save you from ever needing to probably meet me or another endodontist in your hood. But it is such a simple thing that can not only give you a beautiful smile, but also protect your heart because it really improves your oral health.
I want to give a plug for floss that is PFAS free. Listeners, I'll put some links in the show notes for you, but I'm big on non toxic floss. And if you're not using a water pick, choosing a floss that doesn't have a coating with PFAS is important because if you're flossing and your gums are bleeding, that uh, chemical is going into your bloodstream versus just cooking with it or whatever might actually be better for you than flossing with it. So I don't know if you're aware that floss has PFAS, but I actually did like a viral video on TikTok of someone like doing it on their hair. And
What's your favorite floss? I'd love to know.
I think it's also sustainable. Hold on. I have to look up the brand because I use the little flosser pick things. So like the name isn't on I don't like the string itself. I am very picky because I have mouth issues. Sorry,
Yep.
Matt. Okay.
Everyone has to do what works for them. And I love that.
I love the Humble Co. floss picks. They're plant-based material, so they're like compostable and their thread is PFAS free. I also like Cocoa Floss, I think it
Yes.
is, if someone
that-
likes the full string kind.
That's my favorite.
Yep. Those are the 2 so I'll put links in the show notes for everybody just to be aware of the ingredients in some of the products. I also have recommendations for an all natural mouthwash, which a lot like my dentist is actually what recommended it to us, but it's called Tooth and Gum Tonic by the Dental Herb Company, and we love that. The kids love that, and then we also use both fluoride. My husband uses fluoride toothpaste because he's like you with his mouth. And then I use Risewell toothpaste, which is a mineral based fluoride free toothpaste. So we'll put all those links in the show notes for you listeners if you're looking to improve your oral health in a science backed, dentist supported way, because we want to make sure that what we're using is actually working and is good for us. But thank you so much, Dr. Sonia, for being here on the show. Listeners, if you'd like to find Dr. Sonia in the future, you can follow her on Instagram at Dr. Sonia. It's Chopra, right?
Yep.
And we'll put links in the show notes for you there. Also, the website is the same, just DR. Is there anything else you'd like to say to listeners before we part ways?
No, thank you so much for allowing me to speak my nerdy self about teeth. I love it. And I'm really excited when people are open to the conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. And listeners, if you enjoyed the show, please leave a review saying so. You just heard us give a speech about how important reviews are, and your positive one is a huge benefit to us. Doesn't cost you anything, but it helps others find the show and enables us to continue to do this work. Don't forget to follow or subscribe in whatever podcast app you're using. And as always, we appreciate your willingness to be open to growth through your own personal changes. No one is perfect, but in listening, learning, and unlearning, we can choose to become better versions of ourselves for ourselves. Thank you, listeners, and thank you, Dr. Sonia.
Thank you.